Pepe Castro es un escritor de Chicago, pero nacido y criado en el Perú. Es profesor de literatura en Purdue University Calumet y hoy está aquí esta noche para presentar su más reciente obra, una colección de cuentos cortos en español. La lectura va a ser primero en español y luego vamos a interponer de español a inglés. Y luego un question and answer. Después de la lectura, preguntas y respuestas. ¿Ok? De nuevo, gracias por estar aquí hoy. Pepe?
Oh, thank you very much for coming. It's really a pleasure to be here at this library. As you have noticed, it's a very, very nice library. Bookstore, excuse me. I'm very, very happy for the invitation. Muchas gracias por estar acá en esta librería que he abierto recientemente. Gracias por la invitación, Manuel. Gracias por la invitación. Y realmente gracias por estar acá. Al mismo tiempo que quisiera aprovechar la oportunidad para expresar mi solidaridad con el pueblo, con los pueblos del Caribe y también con el pueblo mexicano, que en estos días están viviendo momentos extremadamente difíciles. At the same time, I would like to express my solidarity with the people from the Caribbean islands and the people from Mexico who are living a very, very difficult moment. Manuel has indicated what basically we are going to do. We are going to have a bilingual reading. I'm going to read the part in Spanish, and Manuel is going to help me with the part in English. The short story that we are going to read is called Hyde Park. It takes place here in Chicago, in Hyde Park. And well, I'm going to start. Thank you very much. El timbre sonó 2 veces. Juan Carlos estaba sentado en el sillón de la sala corrigiendo los exámenes del curso introductorio de filosofía. Miró su reloj. Eran las 11 de la mañana de un día domingo. Nadie solía visitarlo a esa hora. En realidad, desde que Nela, aquella alumna que se convirtió en su amante, había desaparecido, nadie lo visitaba a ninguna hora. El timbre de la puerta del apartamento sonó por tercera vez. Hacía 8 años que se había mudado a ese apartamento en Hyde Park. Lo consideró como una compra acertada. Buena ubicación, vista al lago, no muy grande ni muy pequeño tampoco. Los intereses eran bajos, los pagos de la hipoteca estaban al alcance de su sueldo de profesor universitario. Pensaba que así había asegurado su futuro. ¿Quién sabe si algún día se atrevería a venderlo para comprar otro? El solo hecho de embarcarse al papeleo y el trajín de otra compra-venta lo desalentaba.
The doorbell rang twice. Juan Carlos was sitting in an armchair in the living room grading exams from his Introduction to Philosophy course. He looked at his watch. It was 11 on a Sunday morning. No one usually visited him at this hour. Actually, since Nela, a student who became his lover, had disappeared, no one ever visited him. The apartment doorbell rang a 3rd time. He had moved into that apartment in Hyde Park 8 years ago. He thought of it as a wise buy. Good location with a view of Lake Michigan. Not too big nor too small. The interest rates were low. The mortgage payments were within reach of his university professor's salary. He thought doing so had secured his future. Who knew if one day he would dare sell it to buy another one? Just the thought of embarking on all that paperwork and physical effort of going through the contractual agreements discouraged him.
Durante esos años, su vida había transcurrido dando clases de ética y filosofía en una de las universidades de Chicago, escribiendo artículos en revistas especializadas, viajando a dar charlas sobre Hegel, Hume o Sartre. Casi sin darse cuenta, dejó de viajar a Uruguay, el país de su padre. Tabaré, el último de sus primos que vivía en Montevideo, se había mudado a Michigan antes de la compra del apartamento en Hyde Park. Así que hacía desde un tiempo que no tenía a quien visitar en Uruguay. Y aunque Juan Carlos era nacido y criado en Chicago, toda la historia del país de su viejo latía bajo su piel. Antes, las aguas de las playas montevideanas eran claras, solía decir don Francisco, su padre, cebando un mate. Cuando iba a Malvín, a Carrasco o a Punta Gorda, me metía a la playa hasta la cintura y podía verme no solo los pies, sino hasta los pelos de las piernas. Así de clara era el agua.
During those years, his life had passed by teaching classes on ethics and philosophy at one of the universities in Chicago, writing articles for specialized journals, traveling to conferences to give presentations on Hegel, Hume, or Sartre. Almost without realizing it, he had stopped traveling to Uruguay, his father's homeland. Tabaré, the last of his cousins who lived in Montevideo, had moved to Michigan before he had bought his apartment in Hyde Park, so he no longer had anyone in Uruguay to visit. Although Juan Carlos had been born and raised in Chicago, the entire history of the country of his old man pulsated beneath his skin. Years ago, the waters of the beaches in Montevideo was clear, his father Francisco, sipping mate, would tell him. When I used to go to Malvín, to Carrasco, or to Punta Gorda, I would go into the water up to my waist, and I could see not only my feet, but even the hairs on my legs. That's how clear the water was.
Esa había sido la época en que Uruguay era conocido como la Suiza de América, la época de la democracia, la libertad de prensa, la seguridad social. Era la época en que Uruguay era campeón del mundo en fútbol. No te imaginas lo que fue vivir ese 2-1 contra Brasil en el mismo Brasil. Yo estaba chico, pero fue un carnaval tremendo. Es que todo se cayó de golpe, brutalmente de golpe, como si bajaran unas cortinas negras y al levantarlas tuvieras otro país. Esos fascistas lo jodieron todo, decía don Francisco, cebaba otro mate, miraba a través de la ventana el blanco invierno de Chicago. ¿Quién sabe con qué empezaron primero? Si con la intercepción de llamadas o con el cierre de un periódico de corte socialista o con la prohibición de algunos libros o con la tortura de un estudiante universitario que no tenía quien lo defendiera.
The period of democracy, that was the era in which Uruguay was known as the Switzerland of America. The period of democracy, the free press, the safe society. It was the time when Uruguay was world champion in soccer. You can't imagine what it was to experience that 2-1 win over Brazil, in Brazil itself. I was a kid, but it was a tremendous festival. Everything fell apart suddenly, cruel, as if black curtains lowered, and upon raising them it was another country. Those fascists fucked it all up, Francisco would say, brewing another mate. He looked through the window to see the white winter of Chicago. Who the hell knows what they started with? If it was by bugging phone calls, or by closing down a socialist-leaning newspaper, or by censoring some books, or by torturing a university student who had no one to defend him.
Pero de pronto nos vimos viviendo en un país de miedo. El que tenía una opinión diferente a la de los militares caía en cana, en tortura o era desaparecido. Aquí en Estados Unidos nadie puede entender eso, nadie. Pero yo al principio no creía que estaban sucediendo esas cosas en Uruguay. Eso sucedía en otros países, pero no en el nuestro. Fue tu tío Ignacio el que me habló del chuponaje. Yo le respondía que debía estar durmiendo mal. Luego me contó que una de sus estudiantes de la Facultad de Letras había desaparecido. Ahí lo tomé por loco.
But suddenly we found ourselves living in a country of fear. Anyone who had an opinion different from that of the military was beaten with a cane, tortured, or he would simply disappear. Here in the United States, no one could understand that. No one. But I, in the beginning, didn't believe those things were happening in Uruguay. That happened in other countries, but not in ours. It was your Uncle Ignacio who spoke to me about the takeover. I answered back that he must be sleeping poorly. Later, he told me that one of his students from the Department of Liberal Arts had disappeared. Based on that, I thought he was crazy.
La cosa se puso jodida cuando tu tío no volvió. Fui a su casa y todo estaba tirado. Sus libros regados por el suelo, los papeles, todo. Entonces salí a buscarlo por donde sea. Éramos diferentes, pero era mi hermano, de sangre. Fui a hospitales, a la morgue, a las comisarías. Hasta en el manicomio estuve. No había rastro de él. Era invierno en Uruguay. Y como vivía a 2 cuadras de la Rambla, una tarde caminé hacia allá. Pensé que ahí podría encontrar una respuesta sobre tu tío. Claro, no encontré nada, pero nunca vi el agua de la playa tan revuelta, como si algo podrido se viniera desde lo más profundo. Al otro día recibí una llamada anónima. Iban a venir por mí. No entendía por qué, tal vez solo porque estuve buscando a mi hermano Ignacio. Entonces terminé viajando por estos lares. Entonces nuestro futuro fue volvernos un país de miedo.
Things got fucked up when your uncle didn't come back. I went to his house and everything was in a mess. His books scattered all over the floor, his papers, everything. Then I went out to look for him wherever I could. We were different, but he was my brother, my own blood. I went to hospitals, to the morgue, to the police stations. I even went to the mental hospital. There wasn't even a trace of him. It was winter in Uruguay, and since he lived 2 blocks from the boardwalk along the beach, one afternoon I walked there. I thought I might be able to find an answer there about your uncle. Of course, I didn't find anything, but I had never seen the water at the beach so rough, so dirty, as if something rotten had come from the deepest parts. The following day I received an anonymous phone call. They were coming for me. I didn't understand why. Maybe only because I was looking for my brother Ignacio. Then I ended up in these parts. Then our future was to become a country of fear.
El timbre volvió a sonar. Juan Carlos se acercó a la puerta. Abrió. 2 tipos vestidos de traje oscuro estaban allí. Ambos masticaban chicle. Ambos tenían el cabello bien recortado. Uno de ellos, de aspecto latino, llevaba lentes de sol, a pesar de estar en un vestíbulo. El otro tenía pinta de tener ancestros eslavos. ¿Qué le tomó tanto en abrir?, dijo el latino. ¿Quiénes son ustedes? ¿No lo adivina?, respondió el de aspecto eslavo. No, realmente no.
The doorbell rang again. Juan Carlos approached the door. He opened it. There were 2 guys dressed in dark suits. Both were chewing gum. Both had short hair. One of them, Latino-looking, was wearing sunglasses in spite of being in the lobby. The other looked Slavic. "Why did it take you so long to answer the door?" the Latino said. "Who are you guys?" "Can't you guess?" responded the Slavic-looking man. "No, not really."
Los visitantes se miraron. Luego, sincronizadamente, mostraron sus identificaciones. Capitán Carlos García, del FBI. Él es el teniente Tom Jarrosky. ¿Nos deja pasar? Los hizo entrar. Ambos miraron el apartamento como si husmearan. Ya sabe a qué venimos, ¿no?, dijo García. Juan Carlos pensó que tal vez querían una carta de recomendación para un estudiante que postularía al FBI. Luego, recordó que el semestre anterior había enviado una carta apoyando a Scott Peterson, un alumno que había sido marín y postuló al FBI. Debía ser eso. Seguramente querían más información sobre Scott.
The guests looked at him. Then, in synchronized movement, they showed their ID badges. Special Agent Carlos Garcia from the FBI. This is Special Agent Tom Jarowski. Can we come in? He let them in. Both looked at the apartment as if they were sniffing for something. You know why we are here, don't you? Garcia said. Juan Carlos thought that perhaps they wanted a letter of recommendation for a student who was applying to be an FBI agent. Then he remembered that last semester he had sent a letter of recommendation for Scott Peterson, a student who had been a Marine and who had applied to the FBI. That must be it. Surely they wanted more information about Scott.
¿Es sobre Scott? A Scott le va bien, dijo el que parecía eslavo. Entonces, no sé. Queremos los nombres, dijo García. Los nombres. Pensó que había un error, que seguramente se habían equivocado de apartamento y de persona. Díganos los nombres, profesor, y nos ahorramos esta conversación. Sabemos bien quién es usted. Sabemos las páginas de internet que usted revisa. La del Jazeera, por ejemplo, dijo García.
Is it about Scott? Scott's fine, said the Slavic-looking guy. Then I don't understand. We want the names, Garcia said. The names? He thought that there had been an error. Surely they had mistaken his apartment for that of another person. Tell us the names, Professor, and that will spare us this conversation. We know well who you are. We know the internet sites that you visit, such as Al Jazeera, for example, said Garcia.
Juan Carlos se sorprendió y ellos se dieron cuenta. Le hubiera gustado decirles cómo se atrevían a indagar en eso, que eso era en contra de sus derechos, pero intuyó que ese no era el mejor camino. También intuyó que no había un error de identidad. Era él, definitivamente, al que buscaban. ¿Pero de qué nombres hablaban? También sabemos de sus artículos, profesor. ¿Está usted en contra del gobierno? ¿Es esto un interrogatorio? Se defendió él, no oficialmente. Sabemos bien que usted está involucrado.
Juan Carlos was surprised, and they realized it. He would have liked to tell them how dare they investigate him. It was against his rights to do so. But he suspected that that wasn't the best road to take. He also felt that this was not a case of mistaken identity. He was definitely the one they were looking for. But what names were they talking about? We also know about your articles. Are you against the American government? Is this an interrogation? He defended himself. Not officially. We know for sure you are involved.
¿Involucrado en qué? Se preguntó. Quiso decirles que era un profesor de filosofía, medianamente pagado, que sí era cierto que veía la página web de Al Jazeera, pero que eso no era un delito, que su novia había desaparecido y nunca más supo de ella. Nela, ¿qué había pasado con ella? ¿Tendría ella algo que ver con esto? ¿Ella habría informado de su hábito de explorar en la página de Al Jazeera? ¿Por eso habría desaparecido de su vida de la noche a la mañana? Entonces vio que la gente de aspecto latino husmeaba sus libros que estaban en los estantes de la sala.
Involved in what? He asked himself. He wanted to tell them that he was a philosophy professor with average pay, that it was true that he looked at the Al Jazeera webpage, but that wasn't a crime. That his girlfriend had disappeared and he never heard from her again. Nella, what had happened to her? Could she have something to do with this? Had she given out the information that he frequently navigated the Al Jazeera website? Is that why she disappeared out of his life from one day to the next? Then he noticed that the Latin-looking guy started prying through his books on the living room shelves.
Sabemos también lo que predica en sus clases. Vamos, profesor. ¿Quiénes son sus contactos? ¿Acaso no ha dicho usted en sus clases que posiblemente el gobierno planeó el ataque de las Torres Gemelas? Entonces, pensó en Scott. Sí, ¿quién otro? Él podría haber pasado esa información sobre sus clases, pero no tenía el derecho a la libertad de cátedra. no estaba protegido por la primera enmienda de la Constitución. De nuevo le pido que suelte los nombres, profesor.
We also know that what you lecture about in your classes. Come on, Professor. Who are your contacts? Haven't you said in your classes that it could have been the government that planned the attack on the Twin Towers? Then he thought about Scott. Yes, who else? He could have given that information about his classes. But doesn't a professor have the right to free speech? Wasn't he protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution? I'm going to ask you one more time to give us the names, Professor.
De pronto escuchó el golpe de varios de sus libros que cayeron al suelo. El agente de aspecto latino los había lanzado desde el estante más alto. Oiga usted, no tiene derecho a hacer eso. Otra ruma de libros cayó al piso. Pero qué lecturas tan interesantes, profesor, dijo burlonamente. Y otro montón de libros volvió a caer, desperdigándose por el piso. Le prohíbo que haga eso, gritó con todas sus ganas, como pocas veces lo había hecho en su vida.
Suddenly he heard a crash of several of his books as they fell to the floor. The Latin-looking agent had raked them off of the highest shelf. Hey, you don't have the right to do that. Another stack of books fell to the floor. What interesting readings, Professor, he said mockingly. And another pile of books fell again, scattering all over the floor. I forbid you to do that! He shouted with all the willpower he had, as he had done so few times in his life.
No se dio cuenta cuando sorpresivamente sintió un golpe que le cruzó la cara. Nadie lo había golpeado antes y desconocía la sensación. Se descubrió de bruces en el suelo, rodeado de sus libros. Por un instante pensó en su padre cuando contaba que encontró todos los libros regados en casa de su tío Ignacio. Se tocó la cara y sintió un hilo caliente. Entonces supo que estaba sangrando. Aquí no pasaban esas cosas, pensó. Eso sucedía en el país de su padre, en el Chile de Pinochet. Aquí había derechos, había democracias, pero el dolor de la cara, como si estuviera a punto de reventar, demostraba otros indicios. Vamos, profesor, evitemos esto y díganos los nombres de sus contactos. Juan Carlos alzó la cara y por la ventana pudo ver el lago Michigan. Nunca había visto el agua tan turbia, como si algo podrido se viniera desde lo más profundo.
He didn't recognize what it was when, surprisingly, he felt a blow across his face. No one had ever hit him before, and he failed to recognize the feeling. He only realized it when he found himself face down on the floor, surrounded by his books. Suddenly, he thought about his father telling him how he found all of the books strewn across his Uncle Ignacio's house. He touched his face and felt the burning spot. Then he realized that he was bleeding. These things don't happen here, he thought. This happens in his father's country, or in the Chile of Pinochet. One had rights here, democracy existed. But the pain he felt, his face as if it were going to burst, gave him proof to the contrary. Come on, Professor, let's avoid this and tell us the names of your contacts. Juan Carlos raised his face, and he could see the lake through the window. He had never seen the water so rough, as if something rotten was rising from the deepest parts.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much for putting up with our bilingual here. It's an interesting way to read a story. Gracias por soportar el experimento de bilingüe. Quiero referirles también que tenemos los libros de Pepe aquí disponibles para comprar aquí en la librería. I want to let you all know that we have the books of Jose Castro here today, so you can buy them here today. And now we open up the floor. If you have any questions, if you have any answers, that would be even more interesting.
Bueno, primero, did you write this before Trump got elected?
Yes.
Very
Yes.
good.
Yes.
Very good.
Because actually that's a story that happened to a philosophy professor at Purdue University. Actually, before a meeting that we were going to have, he told that story, openly. And when he mentioned that story, I said, wait a minute, this is a short story. And of course, later, I decided to make some connections with Wilde, and I was trying to create like a circle.
Yes.
So basically, that's the story that inspired me. At the same time, there is a short story written by Mario Benedetti called Ganas de Embromar. He's laughing because we read that story when we were 14, and perhaps was the first Mario Benedetti short story that we read. And it's more or less the same topic. It's somebody who doesn't believe, somebody in the 60s who doesn't believe that something illegal could happen here.
Right. Well, it's the illusion that this is such a better place than those other places with dictatorships and so on. And of course, in the 50s and 60s, there was the McCarthy period, and this was happening to lots of people. So that's a very beautiful part of the story. The other thing is, of course, Kafka's the other model here for the story. People who come to the house and the rest. Joseph K., I think you captured Kafka quite a bit in the story. Give it the ambiente, I think, of the tone of the story. I have to say, I was in Montevideo. One of the first things that struck me when I was there was how similar, when you go to the center of town and look at the building, by the Rio de la Plata, and you're looking up at the buildings, the condominiums are on your left, and the what looks like a lake is on your side. It reminded me so much of Chicago. It was extraordinary, and so I think somehow, whether you were conscious of that, that becomes really, because you talk about the smell at the beginning of the story and then come back to it, which is beautiful. It's unfair, I read the story very recently. So I got into some of these things, but a little.
I'm not sure if I have to translate that into Spanish, but
Puedo hacerlo tú.
lo que dije en español básicamente era que hubo una historia de un colega amigo de filosofía. Y este cuento en realidad está basado en algo real que le sucedió a este colega, que realmente dos agentes del FBI fueron a buscarlo y le hacían estas preguntas: ¿cuáles son sus nombres? También le decían, estaban enterados que mi colega revisaba la página de Al Jazeera, Entonces, y él estaba sorprendido de qué le estaban hablando, O sea, no sabía de ningunos nombres realmente, Y finalmente no lo golpearon, Tampoco tiraron sus libros. That's my own part, pero sí le dijeron, esta conversación no se acabó, como diciéndole, we might come back, Podríamos regresar en algún momento, Y por otro lado, la conexión literaria con un cuento de Mario Benedetti que se llama Ganas de Embromar, que también habla sobre la posibilidad de que empiece algo ilegal en un país que tenía una tradición fuerte de mantener una democracia, libertad, de respeto a los derechos humanos, y que de pronto todo eso cambió. Lito, había una pregunta.
Sí, Pepe, no, me gustó mucho el cuento y bueno, siempre me gustan mucho las cosas que escribes tú. Es para que me rebaje el libro.
No es mala idea,
¿no? Pero ¿sabes qué? Me gusta porque es reflejar una radiografía que fue la historia real de Sudamérica. No solamente Uruguay, sino que muchos países. Y me gusta mucho la metáfora esa del agua, ¿no? Que se podía ver los vellos de las piernas. Eso fue antes pero después el agua turbia, que se reflejan los muertos que se encontraban en las aguas de los ríos, de los mares. Y también, mira, la parte esa de la visita del FBI. Aquí ocurre muchas veces, ¿no? Y ocurre incluso con finales bien trágicos, pero estas son las noticias que no aparecen en los canales hispanos, mucho menos. No podrán aparecer muchas novelas, pero no las noticias reales. Yo creo que ahora nosotros tenemos que cuidarnos, o sea, la gente va a tener que cuidar el lenguaje porque estamos en un periodo muy crítico, muy peligroso. Entonces, yo no digo esto para asustar a la gente ni asustarme yo. Cada vez que más me va a pasar de todo lo que me pasó. Entonces, pero me parece interesante no refrescar esa historia, porque es como digo, refrescar, ¿no?, lo que pasó, o sea, lo que se vivió. Posiblemente mucha gente aquí no lo ha vivido y no piensa en eso, pero es una historia real y lo más terrible es esa historia nace, la semilla de esa historia está aquí.
Sí. No sé si quieres resumir un poco.
No en la librería,
Yes, I mean,
no
Platón.
en esta librería, no.
So it's just his commentary was just about how well, first of all, he likes the story and he likes everything that Pepe writes. But and I keep calling you Pepe. Your name is Jose, but I've known you for a long time. And so we spoke about this before one time personally about how the name Pepe in certain American circles is viewed as almost they have no idea that it's a nickname. And so I don't mean to be disrespectful to Jose. I mean, I admire him very greatly, and he's also a good friend of mine. So, I'm informal with him, but only because I've known him for many years, but I really don't want to make it
Está bien, Manuel.
Anyway, so, but Lito also said that one of the things that characterizes a short story, this one that we just read, is the history of Latin America, that this has happened in other parts of Latin America, the kind of the takeover by the military, the repression of civil rights, and especially in Uruguay, which was, I don't know, maybe all of you know this, but Uruguay was literally called the Switzerland of Latin America or of South America. It was one of the most liberal, one of the freest, one of the most civil societies in Latin America, and in a very few short years, it became a military dictatorship of the most odious kind, with serious repressions of human rights, torture, and everything that a military dictatorship carries out in a society. And as Lito says, I think a lot of people in this country do not understand that these things have happened in Latin America. So I think, and I want to ask you this about the collection, because it's not just political. The word hechizo, that's a specific. The translation of that is brujeria. It's witchcraft.
Witchcraft.
Right?
Witchcraft.
Spell. Throw a spell. Hechizo, right? So what other stories in your collection maybe address that kind
Well,
of?
Hechizo is one of the stories. Then we have this one, Hyde Park. There is another one called Sasha that is related to the Slavic world. There's another story, the title is La Llamada, which is somebody who is an immigrant and is trying to call his family during Christmas night. There is another story also called Aún viven las manos de Santiago Berríos, which is a long story, more or less 40 pages. Basically that.
And, y ahí voy a tomar otra vez la personalidad que tenemos, la amistad. So, aún viven las manos de Santiago Berríos. The translation would be, the hands of Santiago Berríos still are alive. They're still alive. And I worked in that story with you, translating some of it into English. That's a very interesting short story because I relate that story to other stories in Latin America that are famous for the sort of obsession, or maybe not obsession, but the sense of impending death, right? So El Sur from Jorge Luis Borges, if anybody's read that, or of course the famous one by Garcia Marquez, The Chronicle of a Death Foretold. And in Aún viven las manos de Santiago Berríos, that I think that's addressed, right? Santiago Berríos, in some horrible metaphorical manner, is being condemned to death. He doesn't know it. And I highly recommend you read that short story. It's a long short story. It's a novella, really. I never asked you this. What inspired you to write that?
I was trying to write a love story first.
Okay. Amor y muerte, right? Love and death.
So not worth it.
But then I realized that it was better to write a very realistic, bloody story that was taking place at a slaughterhouse. I felt more comfortable with a slaughterhouse.
Okay.
But really, actually, part of that is yes, I was trying to write a love story, but something else
Came up.
came out, and then years later, I wrote the love story that you have it there. It was Paris. But originally it was that. Then I realized that when I was writing that draft, there was a very strong scene of torture, very, very strong. And then I realized, wait a minute, this is the beginning of the story. I didn't write that at the beginning, I write that in the middle of the way. No escribí eso al principio, lo escribí más o menos a la mitad. But then I realized, no, this is the beginning. And it's a very, very strong scene in which somebody is going to be tortured. They are asking for the name also, and at some point he doesn't know the name really, But the torture is that much that at some point the three guys who are beating him up, they say, well, if you don't tell me the name, I'm going to castrate you. And because he is so afraid of that, he is going to say the name of the only person who really loves him. So that's the beginning of the story.
Otra vez con los nombres. Once again with
Yes,
naming names.
Yeah, I haven't realized about that.
I just realized it myself. Yeah. Como escritor peruano en Chicago, te llamé como un escritor de Chicago porque aquí tienes tiempo y aquí escribes. La material que sacas para tus cuentos, tu dramaturgia, tu escritura, ¿cómo lo ves tú como un escritor peruano? ¿Cómo has tenido que cambiar tu perspectiva? As a Peruvian writer, and as I said, you're here in Chicago now, so I call you a Chicago writer. How do you see the material of your work? How does a Peruvian writer see that?
Bueno, hay varias cosas. En primer lugar es cómo ves los espacios por los que vas pasando en tu vida. Yo nunca he visto los espacios por los que voy pasando en mi vida de manera cancelatoria, sino más bien de manera acumulativa. De tal modo que en cualquier momento puedes retroceder y volver hacia el espacio inicial, pero lo vas a ver con otros ojos, ¿no? Eso por un lugar, es decir, que yo nací o me crié en una ciudad pequeña que se llama Tacna, después me mudé a Lima, después vine a Chicago, vine a Pittsburgh, ¿no? Entonces todos esos espacios se van acumulando y van generando historias. The question is, how the language of the stories are going to change when you are telling a story related to another space. ¿No? So you read Las Manos de Santiago Berríos, está escrito, it's written with a very colloquial Peruvian language, because the story is Peruvian. No? When I decided to write Hyde I said, I'm not going to use that kind of language. I have to use another language in order to express that kind of story. So that would be the answer. That you have to change the language according to what you are going to tell.
Mark.
Un punto interesante del cuento que no hemos comentado es el hecho de que uno de los de FBI es un latino. Y me parece que eso es un reflejo sobre esa cuestión de los buenos y los malos y cómo se usa el latino dentro del sistema dominante, ¿no? Yo creo que es un toque muy especial y de verdad. Este cuento pasó en Minnesota un amigo mío, visiting professor de México, y le vinieron del FBI y uno era latino que dijo que lo conoció y era muy chicano all the way, as they said in those days. Entonces, ese aspecto de que uno piensa que es de uno, resulta que no es de uno, es de otro, también tiene que ver con la cuestión sobre la novia, la mujer en el cuento. Que me parece un poquito ese truco del cuento, porque uno se queda pensando, ¿esa mujer
La gran ausente.
lo quería o era parte del complot de la FBI desde el principio? O si ella llamó a la policía. Obviamente es un tipo peligroso, que lee las cosas que no debe leer, la policía es terrible y tal, y obviamente tenía razón de dejarlo. Yo no tengo buena idea para ella salir de este hueco, pero uno podría culparte de dar la culpa a ella.
Sí.
Cuidado.
Y la estrategia es un poco dejar pistas abiertas, ¿no? Puede ser ella o puede ser su estudiante también.
Scott Peterson es el nombre del matón, ¿no? Que está en la cárcel ahora.
I think you're right, yeah. It's also the...
Es el nombre de un señor que está en la cárcel por haber matado a 2 o 3 personas.
It's also a
Es una
sausage maker.
coincidencia.
It's also a sausage maker, a hot dog maker. Scott Peterson hot dog.
No, es un señor verdadero.
No. I mean, yeah, it is that as well. Yes, no, Scott Peterson. Lacey Peterson was his victim. I think it was his wife.
Yes, his wife, yeah. But he was very friendly with the police. Pero sí, una persona muy...
So, for the people who only speak English, what did you think of the? Did it give you a different insight to see like the switch from one section of the story in Spanish and then another section in English, or is it easier to just hear just everything in Spanish and then something in English? What is your reaction to that? Because usually, whenever I go anywhere and I hear like a translation, I went to one very interesting, wonderful translation. It was Polish, and everything was done on a screen. So everything was in Polish, but nothing was in English. You had to read it. And other places I've been, it's Spanish usually. They only have like the short story or the poems all first in Spanish, and then you do the translation. So what's the reaction? What was your opinion of any of that? Anybody have any insights into that or opinions? Nobody has an opinion. And this is why Trump won.
No, we have an opinion, but other people...
She has.
Julia.
I think that they both have pros and cons. I like this way because it kind of builds the suspense of the story. But I kind of did wonder what it would be like to hear it all at once.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I think it illuminated the text a little bit because you read with such expression. You know, if you missed a little bit in the Spanish, you certainly picked it up in the English. But I read the story several times, and so I was following Jose. And then, the dramatic version was presented in English.
¿Alguna
It's just it
pregunta?
would have been a long read to hear the whole thing, especially if you know both languages. It would have been a long read just to hear it in one line, and then have to hear the whole thing again. This worked, I thought, beautifully, actually. I thought this is the way it should be done. Para un cuento.
That was his idea.
Es difícil leer los cuentos en vez de un poema. Y eso era una manera de hacerlo suave.
¿Alguna pregunta?
Anything else? ¿Algún otro comentario? I see a lot of young writers here today, so you guys are next. Let's get you guys to come up here and start writing some stuff. So don't forget, we have his books here at the counter. We've got a lot of other books in our store. So we also have one in English. So it's
The love stories in English.
The love stories in English. Again, thank you very much for coming out tonight. I really, really want to express my thanks, my gratitude for all of you coming out here today, showing support, not only for Pepe, but for the bookstore. And hopefully we'll have more events like this. The next event we're having is the 29th, next Friday. We've got 5 translators that are going to read stuff in English from 5 different languages, including the language that I've never heard of, Basco. I mean, I've heard of it, but I've never heard anybody read from in English of Basque literature. So you guys are all invited next Friday, 7 o'clock, September 29th. And I'm here Tuesdays through Saturdays, 6 to 9. We're open every day of the year, basically. 11 to 7, Sundays and Mondays, and then 11 to 9 every other day. All right? Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you.